and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together with their randomly designed and randomly organized. It's an oxymoron here in Wait, It Gets Better land. Anyways, we come together with ideas and we try to make a story that is cohesive, one that makes sense, at least as far as fantasy, sci-fi stories can make sense. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. I had Hero. What did you guys have?
Prophecy.
I had setting.
Okay.
Do you want to go first then, Seth?
Sure, I'll go first. So the setting of this, I would say, I don't know, depending on how it all fits, I would say it would be kind of like the idea of like the Western expansion of the United States, where you had like all these little towns and like, you know, the sheriff was the law of the land kind of thing.
Right.
But not so much like it was like some lawless thing. But what I think it is it's an entire society where this is taking place, where everybody has like they're in like this nation or this nation state, much like I guess you could say America is, or maybe like what America would have been like maybe pre-Civil War, possibly.
Okay.
In a sense. But more like kind of like the old West, where you have like this town and the surrounding area and you have the sheriff, and like everything is very local. Like they're all connected like broadly in a broad sense, but then like each different place kind of runs their own charter underneath of going, okay, this is the law of the land and this is kind of how this town functions, which I think is kind of a lot like what it is, but like more or less like you step into our, you know, town's boundaries, this local area, which the peace is held by, you know, the sheriff, who then employs the kind of like the local militia, or like everything. That was the thing, like that never died off. That's like my idea of like America, where like the militia part never died off. Everybody kind of got kind of a very active role in their own protection and then the protection of their tight knit kind of town or community. And so it's like kind of a thing where like everybody packs heat down to, you know, as soon as they can.
Packs heat, you're saying everyone's armed?
Yeah, pretty much. And that's kind of like the role of the government, partly in the sense, in the broad sense, is making sure that all of their small communities are very well armed and independently like taken care of for their own well-being. So like everything is like a lot of like small communities, instead of being like, there's not like, oh man, like if you lived in, let's say, Wyoming, you'd probably never know what lobster is, because, you know, that's what they have on the seacoast. Sure, some, you know, traveling merchant might come through and bring this exotic thing from the coastland, which is all good and dandy, but like no one ever, not like they're ignorant, but no one like gets too hooked on needing to have anything too far outside of their, what is like within a day's journey or grasp of their town or community. So like now, everybody what's that?
Are we currently in this kind of level of technology, or is this just the way that the world is organized?
I think it's the way, at least this country that I'd say most of the story takes place is organized. I think maybe the whole world could be organized this way, but so you know, I'd say
what's happened then is that like people have kind of decided that that instead of grouping together and creating massive infrastructure, they're going to stay in kind of this village style system, and therefore kind of almost stunt their own growth, right? Because things like building a train isn't necessarily that big a deal to them. Am I kind of understanding this?
Kind of. So almost imagine too. So one of the things too is monopoly laws. And so part of this idea came up in talking to someone, and okay, so everyone out there, I'm going to say this and it might ruffle some feathers, but I'm an Edison man, not a Tesla man. Not that I...
Bye, Seth. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you later. Okay.
I'm
just kidding.
Let me explain this. So in the battle between like alternating current and direct current, one of the things that, there was several things, not that it wasn't great to have a much more powerful electric current that could power a lot more things from a farther distance, but it is kind of given what you have now, where you really only have one or two electric companies. And, you know, there's one relay station in, you know, Ohio, that if that went out, you know, Minnesota can kiss power goodbye, right? Because
how is that Nikola Tesla's fault?
I'm not necessarily saying it's Nikola Tesla's fault. I'm just saying that's what eventually got adopted. And so now you have one spot that brings, say, that energy halfway across the country, whereas let's say from the Edison model, the DC current, it was weak enough. It would power, what you needed, but you'd have to have like every town or like I'm taking like up here where I live, I won't say where, but up here where it's a small town and there's, there is an east side, but there's maybe only about 5,000 people here.
Right.
Where you'd probably need maybe about 3 power companies, local power companies that are creating that. If you were running on the DC system, you would have to have probably at least 2 or 3, depending, power companies that brought to that local spot, because that's as much as it would do, which would then give rise that, I could, let's say, go make a power plant in my backyard and, hook my neighbors up and start Seth's, super power.
Yeah.
And so instead of, not that someone couldn't monopolize that and just, oh, I've got the money, I'm going to build 10 of them, but it would give that you would have to have like a different entity creating this power instead of one centralized thing in Ohio that, goes all the way to New York and all the way to the Dakotas.
I think it might not be Tesla and Edison that you're for, but more so the breaking up of centralized power.
Right. So I use that Edison Tesla because that's, in my mind, what was familiar with it. So I'm not in this sense, oh, Edison was the greatest guy. I'm just saying with the model of the DC current, that was the thing then.
Right.
I would say that would have lent.
That's the sort of thing that's happening in your setting where everything is more localized.
Right. And it's like that's
Right.
kind of whether they've come to a point where like they've just relocalized everything or just kept kind of that spirit of, okay, we have the local militia and that's like how we keep the peace.
Yeah.
And we
The
have,
sheriff.
the sheriff.
So
and
you can have like different localities would have very different flavors. Like, for example, if one town had a pretty strong sheriff, a guy that was active, involved, checked in on everybody, knew what was going on, and everybody respected him. And he kind of called the shots. Whereas in another place where you had, the mayor's nephew that never really got ahead in the world, but he was sheriff and he kind of is mostly ceremonial. But then if there ever was a problem, then you kind of had the militia was sort of vulnerable to hotheads. A few hotheads could get people stirred up and there'd be more vigilantism going on and it would be a little less orderly.
Yeah, you could have a town that was sort of heavily influenced by like the mercantile guilds.
Yeah.
Who in truth made a lot of decisions, and the militia was more or less kind of the strongmen for these guilds.
Yeah.
Or
you could have like a couple of one really big rancher that had kind of swallowed up, and he had access to ability to cut off water to, some of the smaller ranchers. So he kind of pushed his weight around and spread some money around. And he had the sheriff was a tin star that was in his pocket. And so you could have different settings. The depending on which locale you were in, it could be any number of variations of how this localized thing would work.
Right.
I think it might be a good time for me to just throw the prophecy in. And I kind of have a setting element to it, which fits in really well. So I'm just this will be just really short, and then I'll add in later as we go. But anyway, just spring was late this year. Been a period of warming for the last decade or so, and but this year, spring was as late as people remember it ever being. And the prophecy was clear. It's essentially this: when the spring is late in coming, and the ravens flee, the falcons will return and nest again in the bell tower. Then that which was hidden in shadow will be exposed. And this was a prophecy that has been passed down, and it is something that for several generations at least has been a thing that people have taught their children. And the bell tower has, they say in the old days that falcons used to roost there.
Right.
But there hasn't been any falcons anywhere around from time out of mind. And there have been ravens around. They've been around, and they are now. But that's the prophecy. And with the spring being so late and so decidedly different than for the last 10 years or so, people have been talking, whispered, reminding the prophecy when the spring is late and coming.
Right.
and the ravens flee.
Right. I feel like this world needs kind of a setup, because for a place like this to put such stakes in a prophecy, like why would they put such stakes in a prophecy? You know, maybe this village or this area is like renowned for their farmers' almanacs, you know? It's like renowned for their science, their like ability to predict weather, or, you know, maybe this is like the Silicon Valley of the area, you know, where the Nikola Tesla or the Thomas Edison is doing their weird experiments in the mountains, and there's strange, you know, cables connecting the town, you know, as like the beginnings of things like that. I'm just trying to figure out some reason why they would listen to a prophecy.
Yeah, and the other side is that there's been things are being done around here the way they've always been done, and there are some people that fare better in, you know, that have connections with the old families and the guilds, and then they know, you know, where everybody
Right.
knows where they
Right.
where they are. But some people are chafing under what is, you know, and they recognize that there's things that are corrupt, and there
Right.
are things that are run, you know, kind of below, you know, under the table, so to speak.
Right.
And there's no way to really break in. And if you have good ideas and whatnot, there's a chafing that's going on, and there's a kind of I wouldn't go so far as a prevalent despair, but there's definitely a built up, a pent up energy that would make people look for a sign, for a change, for a hero, for something to emerge.
Now, I was thinking there's also the chance that maybe there's some animosity, and the prophecy isn't exactly very clear, you know, like, okay, bell tower. Are they talking about like an actual bell tower, or are they talking about Bell Tower Ridge, right? This one specific area where it's like a fort. It's like a fortified area where there's like gold and like tons of resources. So are they talking about that? You know, the federal government, their standard, the bird that's on it kind of looks like a falcon, but then also kind of looks like a crow, did you say? Or a raven?
Raven, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, so are they going to throw off the government? Is it the government that is? You know, it's like, did the government change their banner to look like the raven so that they could be seen in positive light of the prophecy? So I think we'll introduce the hero now. The hero's name is Liza, like Liz or Liza. Her mother's father was a watchmaker, and she didn't have any sons, and so he taught his mother the trade, and in doing so, then Liza learned the trade from her mom. Her father is a farrier and metal smith, right? He's dabbled in, you know, he's done the farrier work, you know, the shoeing, the nail making, the sort of general fixture, but he's dabbled in some gunsmithing, you know, light gun repair, things like that. He's pretty good at making knives and tempering, and Liza has basically learned the perfect combination of both a absolute respect for intricate detail and the ability to understand complex systems as it comes from watchmaking, and the understanding of metallic properties. And she is turning into what at some point will be known as the best gunsmith that has ever existed. Her understanding and sort of fascination with the small and intricate leads towards designing of very complex systems. She has a design for a rifle that can repeat up to 6,000 times a minute. You know, it would require some unknown type of ammo or cooling in order to do it, and it would be very expensive, you know. A lot of these are just kind of ideas that she has just begun to turn into reality as she's just reaching the place of sort of adulthood where she's going to take on her own, basically choose her own path, you know. She's not really a blacksmith. She's not really built to swing a hammer and be a blacksmith, but also, you know, her mother is still the watchmaker, and they don't really need more than one watchmaker. So she's kind of stuck in this place. But the biggest thing about her is that she cuts her teeth by prophecy and destiny. Her whole life, she's grown up in this almanac town where everything seems to be because of this or because of that. And she pretty much trusts fate because of this or because of that. Some would say she's incredibly fatalistic, like she doesn't see that she can sort of make her own life, but that's not really how she decides to see it. She has a mind for the mechanical, but she lacks imagination when it comes to certain things. She prefers to rely on intuition. And that is a thing that she kind of takes as an offshoot of almanacking, is that there's some things that she just trusts impeccably, red sky in the morn, sailors be warned. Red sky in the, how does that go?
Red sky at night, sailor's delight.
Red sky in the morn, sailors be warned. That's a thing that she takes on absolute certainty. Signs and wonders like that. A cat crosses her trail and climbs up a tree, and it's a certain color and it's a certain time of day. That means something. That she'll stop what she's doing and move on it. She's the hero. I don't know how it is that she's called up to be the hero, but people are kind of, they're scared of the fact that she is just so abrupt with what she thinks about things. And a lot of people sort of take the almanacs, but then they think, but if I try really hard, it doesn't matter that the almanacs say that it's not a good corn season. If I try really hard, I can grow a bunch of corn, and since no one else is, I'll make a bunch of money. Like that kind of thinking just doesn't work. She's just not in that brain space. Anyways, that's the hero. My goal,
I think maybe something
end goal is for her to have a pair of like beautifully crafted guns that, shoot farther, are super well crafted so they don't fail, or some sort of really unique system, that she has dreamed up. Anyways, what was that, Seth?
So anyways, maybe something inside of some of this for the setting. So kind of in that, I guess you could say, like the American Western expansion, perhaps instead of constantly warring with the indigenous people, maybe there were some wars, but instead of like what we have now where one group of people are all kind of segregated to small areas and not really, I don't know if part of society is the right word.
Right.
Perhaps there was more of a melding of, okay, like we're going to live here, and like these people, so like kind of in that, like you said, with like, okay, like a certain color cat, it made me think of like some of the, was a lot of like the Native American like tells or signs. So maybe not almanacs, but like maybe there's this like group of tellers. They're the tellers. And it's like they're the indigenous people. Instead of like creating their own, like, oh, we're the tribe, like they kind of absorb themselves into the society that was moving in. And they have their own, maybe some of their own towns and places. But instead of being separate, they kind of joined in on this thing. And so it's like not like a priesthood, but kind of like a priesthood where they're like I should say religious, but it's like they're the tellers. They've been here on the land and they know the signs and they know how to read, the falcons and the deer movement and the cat goes up a sycamore tree and that is going to mean and not so much like in like let's say a voodoo like fortune teller kind of thing, but it's like just the like I don't know, like they have the shop or like they're the tellers. They make the almanacs. They read the signs and they kind of give the weather predictions and the things, but it's all based in their kind of ancient ways of telling the seasons and times and things. And maybe that's where some of these like different prophecies come, and that's why they're important. Is because let's say these people that have moved into the let's say Western expansion, instead of kind of kicking out everything that was there in this sense, it's like okay, and they've kind of absorbed same thing. They've absorbed that into their culture and way of life of reading or like keeping up with what they've done and how they've read the land and how they've read the signs and the seasons and the weather and so that's just both of instead of like let's say being at animosity, they've just kind of melded into their own places, society, and that's why perhaps these prophecies or these things are important is because they are tied with let's say the tellers or the almanacs and the
I guess part of the thing I'm personally getting with the hero is kind of like I'm reading the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, and it's kind of like how Roland is a servant of Ka, right? And Ka is just destiny, the way the world works together. It's a lot of different things, but a lot of it can just be described by destiny. And Roland, whenever he tries to buck it, whenever he tries to have it serve him, something always goes wrong. And whenever he is serving it, then it's not that things go right, but at least you can kind of ride it like a wave and not buck it. And that is how that's her outlook. Not like I'm just not going to buck any wave. waves, but like if the world is moving me towards doing something, then that is what I'm going to do, regardless of what I think might be the actual best option. You know, I'm going to stand up for what I think is right, and I'm going to go forward, and Ka's going to move me and use me for things that I don't understand or will only understand later. I don't know how the best way to say it, but I've been reading these books, and I've just been really struck by the fact that Roland doesn't care about how he feels about something, because how he feels about it doesn't matter, because he's never taken the time to really consult how he feels about it. He just knows that this thing is right, and therefore that's what he's going to go for, regardless of how he feels about it. And people call him like a horrible person because he's done what they would consider terrible things. And it's like, okay, maybe, but I am a servant of Ka, so I go and do what it tells me to do. I don't know. I'm
thinking
I'm
that
explaining it wrong. And I
this
really,
Eliza, you know, is she, like you say, she's focused on learning all that, you know, her mother knows that had come down from her grandfather, and then also learning all the skills and the technology, the expertise of her father, and she is delights in the workmanship, the craftsmanship of putting out, you know, turning out a fine firearm.
right.
And she's aware of the flow of things, and but yet there's this thing that is spring is just winter has been lingering. Spring is late this year, and it brings up, well, what about the prophecy?
Right.
And for her, it wouldn't be so much that, oh, I'm just chafing under the oppression, you know, and something has to give, but rather, but if the prophecy says it, you know, I have to go with it, you know. And if the ravens flee and the falcons actually return and nest again in the bell tower, then, you know, that which is hidden in shadow will be exposed. And so I see her preparing herself as the winter lingers and the signs of spring are just out of reach, you know, much later than anybody expected.
And maybe what happens is something along the lines of, it's the prophecy, right? But maybe the order is wrong. Maybe it's when the spring or winter lingers, and that which was in the shadow becomes exposed, the ravens will be driven from the bell tower.
Ooh.
Right? And so what happens is she maybe figures out or sees some sort of deal going down, some sort of thing happening, and because of her sense of like listening to these almanackers, like these predictors,
the
like
tellers.
the tellers, like what Seth was saying, it like, and the way her brain and her spirit like understands and lives in the kind of constant state of omen and sigil, like the kind of constant state of like looking out for things like that, like being a person who is very attentive to the tellers. She kind of sees the writing between the writing and sees something about to happen, and basically at the beginning kind of inadvertently triggers that which was in the shadow coming out, right? And it causes kind of an uproar, and it causes kind of an upset as things that had happened for a long time, that were kind of you know, good old deals that had been happening for years upon years, all of a sudden are interrupted, you know. And before anyone can happen, enough people are kind of in this state of questioning awe.
What the hell is going on here? Yeah.
You know, maybe all of a sudden, like part of the prophecy talks about, you know, I don't know. I just had this idea that like she just does this thing and kind of speaks out to this thing or stops something from happening. My brain is telling me slave trade.
Ooh.
Like she sees something happening, people being moved in some way, and she kind of speaks out against it, you know, and people are kind of like, when they're kind of shocked into the light, you know, she like goes around and like breaks the chains or whatever, and these people go free, and it's all of these people like the slavers are like publicly shamed as all of a sudden a bunch of people kind of notice the thing that they hadn't noticed before, and then she just kind of says, "Yep, that's it. That's what that's what was supposed to happen. That's in line with the omens and how the world is working, and I'm gonna stand up for what's right, and regardless, and not feeling any consequences of doing what's right, which you do a lot of times." And she like goes to sleep, goes home, and then it kind of cuts scene to like a government facility somewhere, and someone has received this news, and they go, "Oh, it's probably nothing. Let's watch out for it, but it's just a prophecy. It doesn't matter, right?" And then the next day, she like wakes up, and there's like 100. Oh God, I just have this vivid picture of kind of like this cobbled street, right, against a cliff face, and there's like houses set into the cliff face, and she like opens the door to her house that she lives in with her parents, and all on the street there is scattered these little white flowers with yellow insets, and they're just like all on the street, and they're just like hundreds and hundreds of them, and she's like, "What's happening?" But like what's happening is that she saved basically the chief or the head person of this clan of these tellers who was being transported somewhere, and like the entire kind of inside of this clan like all recognized her. All right, prophecy that was written by our ancestors how many hundreds of years ago. This person said the words. This person did it at the time. She's the one. She came in to the bell tower, right? The crux of two places. She stood on the top of the bell tower. Just like whatever it was, and she chased out these ravens, these people who were trying to use and abuse us.
The carrion birds.
Yeah. This is it. This is the person.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden she finds herself not kind of like following the path of something from the outside, but like seeing all of a sudden how people are seeing her as the person who's going to like fulfill all these prophecies, and I imagine that would be pretty distressing.
And then I think, of course, it'll come to a crisis. And
as she begins to feel consequences.
And the sheriff, the sheriff is just in this is really just a tin star for the movers and shakers, the people that pull the strings behind the scenes.
Right.
And there's a showdown, and he, of course, has got a couple of slimy characters like staked out in strategic places, so that when they'll get the drop on her when it comes to a showdown, right?
Right.
But unbeknownst to him, she's trained for this her whole life,
right?
And we have like a serious shootout, like, and the bad guys are like, and she just like puts on a display, and just like the guys shooting, trying to back shoot her, sneaking, slipping out of an attic window, and she spins and shoots him in the eye, stuff like that,
Right.
And like she's like didn't cause the violence, but when the showdown came, she was ready.
Yeah, she doesn't start fights, but she sure does finish them.
Yep. My favorite kind of hero.
Yeah, I know, right? And I'm thinking that basically, so there's this really cool moment in the Wheel of Time, and this is spoilers for everyone who hasn't read the books. There's this really cool moment where like there's a huge prophecy about who the big hero is going to be in the Wheel of Time. It's this big guy. He's called the Dragon Reborn. He's gonna do all these things. It's really crazy, and the Dragon Reborn meets with these guys from this other country, these three kings, and they basically ask a really weird question of him, and he kind of smiles and tells them, and they don't, and everyone's kind of like, why did you ask that question? And it basically has come to light that there's like another secret prophecy that these guys were given that this person had to be able to answer in order for them to follow him. And I was thinking about that with like the government finally coming, right? And the government finally, after there's like the whole town an area is in like an uproar. People have decided to, follow her or to not. The word is going out and kind of spreading out that this prophecy has been fulfilled. Of course it's been fulfilled before from other places, people say, and finally the government kind of descends, the federal government, the outside protectors, the ones who encourage free thought and discourage corruption and tyranny, and that's basically all they do. They descend on the I imagine it's kind of like a courtyard, and there's people firing, and she's all by herself now. Her compatriots, some of her compatriots are dead, some of them are hiding. She's all out of bullets, her 6-shooter's out of bullets, her little mini gun that is attached to her arm is all out of bullets. And basically the government descends, and I have like these really vivid pictures for this thing, and this typically doesn't happen to me, but I imagine kind of like the ornithopters from the Dune movie.
Ooh.
So they kind of look like big dragonflies, and you just like hear them coming from far away, and they just land in the courtyard, as people begin to get out, and everyone's kind of like, oh great, what's going to happen now? And basically the high auditor comes to her and asks her just like right in the middle of this combat, and just like asks her a question or a series of questions, and she is kind of confused as well. And basically maybe the prophecy is some sort of like test. It's like, once this person comes, we need them to like fulfill some other thing. It's like even this federal government is waiting for this person. It's like, and everyone else thought that the federal government was going to come to like stop her because she was going to like usurp their power and everything. And she was like kind of considering, well, what am I going to have to do? Once the federal government comes, I'm going to have to like give up, because, we're just barely fighting off the sheriff and his crooked men. We're not going to be able to fight off like this whole other power. And then they come, and it's revealed that they are also all servants of destiny. Like they're not here to stop her. They're here because they want to recruit her, because she like is something bigger than them. I don't know. That's kind of a thought I had.
It's kind of cool though.
Seth, does that sound okay? Have I totally butchered your thing?
No, that's pretty cool.
It's just pretty cool. It's not the coolest thing you've ever heard in your life.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's handsome cool.
Hanson cool. Did you say handsome or Hanson, like the Hanson brothers hockey players?
Handsome, as in good
I've
looking.
just been reading this Dark Tower book, and I've just been feeling so strongly like I want destiny to be real.
Yeah, I want a situation where there's a real story going on, and like each person, the day they find out why they were born and how they fit into the story, like, really matters.
Right, exactly. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this episode of Levi's Slightly Therapeutic. I just needed to talk about how much I want things to matter. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey with us. If you thought this episode was good, I would like to hear about it. You can send me not a text message. You can send me a text message. You can write a text out to me at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com, or you can @ me on Twitter at @getsbettercast. If you DM me, I will reply. If you do like just an @ on Twitter, I'll also reply. If you email me, I'll also reply. If you want me to shout something out, I will also reply. If you want to hear more episodes like this, I would say just wait, it gets better.